Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365 and National Hog Farmer. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Our guest today needs little, if any introduction. Dr. Steve Meyer of EverAg. You've been long providing the pork industry with insight and market guidance, and we're certainly honored to have you with us here today, Steve, to talk a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes in market analysis, as well as some of your career highlights. So welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Well, it's good to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
For those of you that are tuning in today, we thank you for being here. And if you have any questions for Steve, feel free to post those there in the chat area on your screen or in your social media feed. If you'd like to, you can also just give that Steve a thank you or share your favorite Steve Meyer story. We'd love that too. So Steve, as we start our conversation here today, let's kind of start at the beginning, so to speak. When was it that you knew you wanted to be a market analyst? Is this something you kind of set out to be at a young age, or something you kind of just landed on doing? Give us that history.
It was about the time I figured out I wasn't ever going to be a star relief pitcher. So anyway, no, I studied ag economics in college and and animal science as well, and then went on to get a master's in ag econ, was in the sales force a little while for Dow Chemical Company, and then went back to get a PhD. And I thought this is pretty interesting kind of stuff to do, and started out of college and then thought, I really like the private sector better. And then in 1993, the opportunity came to become the staff economist at the National Pork Producers Council at the time. I'd been around the pig business ever since high school. We raised purebred pigs when I was in 4-H and FFA, and so hogs had always been interesting to me. I'd been on the meat staging team, and so the meat industry was interesting to me. And so this was kind of the job I'd prepared for, and it kind of fell in my lap in '93, and the rest is history, I guess. But I don't know. It took me a long time to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up, but this seemed to fit me pretty well.
I think it certainly did. So talk to us about EverAg. I know you're part of that team now. What kind of services do they offer to hog producers and livestock producers?
Well, EverAg is a pretty large company. I think 500 plus employees in kind of different parts of the world. I don't know a lot about the intricacies of that, but they started out as a dairy company. I mean, Rice Dairy, dairy.com, did a lot of dairy analysts. They do a lot of advising for dairy products all the way from milk through cheese, through all the way out through distribution. And so they kind of got in the livestock business in the last few years. We were one of their major acquisitions. Kearns and Associates, or Partners Production Agriculture, was acquired by EverAg. We're now the livestock division. We've got some guys that work in beef, and then we've got the hog side. And we've got about 20 people that do different things for clients, mainly on risk management side, both feed ingredient purchases and marketing of livestock, hogs and cattle both. So we got a pretty wide breadth of knowledge here, and an understanding of what it takes to be successful on this. And we work with a pretty good portion of the pork industry on managing risk one way or another, and we touch a decent amount of hogs out there. And it's just been a really good business for us, and it's grown. And of course, major innovation of the last few years has been the insurance products sold by subsidized by the federal government. They're great tools for producers.
So let's talk about the role USDA plays in supporting or providing data for economists. So as an ag economist, as a hog industry economist, how does that USDA data, how does that factor into some of your insight that you're providing? Is that an important part of giving you some background when you're looking at these things?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. I mean, this is an industry where you have a pretty concentrated set of buyers and packers, and a very diverse set. Even with today's concentration of production, we still have a very diverse group of and large number of producers out there selling pigs. And so you have what we economists call asymmetrical information. The packers are in a position where they can see a lot because they deal with a lot of people. The producers are in a position where they can't see nearly as much. And so if you just leave it at that, the buyer has a lot of advantage here in knowing what's going on in the marketplace. USDA stepped into that void many years ago to provide information to try to level the playing field between concentrated buyers and very diverse or less concentrated sellers by providing information to, especially in agriculture. I mean, it was probably the best example of that asymmetrical market position. And so USDA provided public data. Now, most of that data is still gained through voluntary surveys and put together into reports based on that voluntarily provided information from producers. And that goes from crops to vegetables to cattle to the hogs and pigs report, which is the key piece of information that I use from a supply standpoint to try to project supplies out a year and then use historical relationships to say, what does that mean for prices? And so those voluntary reports are critical for USDA to provide accurate data, but USDA can't provide any better data than they get in the responses to their surveys. And so, there's been a slippage of that over the years. We don't have as good a response rate as we once did. USDA finds their standard errors kind of getting a little larger than they used to. And so it's really important, especially for hog producers, to respond to the USDA Hogs and Pigs Report survey when it's given to them, and to respond accurately. Don't put guesses down there. Be accurate about it. And you're going to have that opportunity here in just a few weeks. The September report will hit the field right after the 1st of September, right after Labor Day. And we'll be gathering data for that late September Hogs and Pigs report that will, again, inform me and a lot of other people about what kind of hog numbers we think we're going to have over the next year or so. And it's not just the hog business. I mean, when you get an acreage survey or a grain stock survey or a cattle on feed survey, all of those are really important to the analysis of these meat and protein markets that we do. And they're all on a voluntary basis. You don't have to respond, but I would urge producers to do so, because your response is important. You can't just say, oh, it doesn't matter where I respond because everybody else will. Well, if everybody thinks that, they have nothing. So I would really encourage producers to respond to those and respond accurately.
So in your opinion, when it comes to the hogs and pigs reports, how deep do those need to go? How deep should USDA be providing that data? Should it go down to does it need to be a broader picture? What helps you as an economist in that regard?
I only look at national data. I only look at national data because that's the data that impacts the marketplace. I've famously said I don't even look at the state level data because it frequently doesn't make any sense. And that's not throwing a rock at USDA or anything else, but anytime you slice and dice these data finer and finer, you run into more opportunity to make mistakes. If you can put them together as an aggregate, you can kind of gloss over a lot of errors, I guess. But I only use the national data. There are some other people that use more detailed data. Now, grain's a little different because you've got a lot more local production. You've got local storage. You've got more basis issues. But on livestock, especially on the Hogs and Pigs report, I only use the national data.
Is there other data that, in your opinion, NASS should be providing that they're not providing for whatever reason?
NASS, I don't know how they would get a whole lot more. I mean, there have been some questions recently about the cold storage report, whether it's covering as many cold storage facilities as it should be, because the numbers have been going down. Now, that might mean we're just keeping less meat in cold storage. And I think that's what the issue is. I've talked to those folks and they say, we're asking the same people the same questions, and we feel like we're getting the same kind of a response rate as we have in the past. So they're pretty comfortable with their numbers. So that's one that there's a little question about, but I think it's kind of bogus. I don't think there's a real problem there. On the AMS side, they do price reporting, and that's a mandatory report from packers. And so there's some details that MPPC has proposed that they add to that. For instance, maybe knowing how many of the hogs are priced off the cutout value would be a piece of information that's not included right now that would be good. Maybe just a percentage number. And so there's some questions about that, but that comes up for reauthorization periodically, and you have a chance to change that by proposal when that's reauthorized. Now, the reauthorization has been kind of a kick the can down the road thing the last 3 or 4 years. And so at some point, we've got to actually talk about this. But that's the place that I think we see the most kind of suggestions for improvement is on the price reporting side, and that's not NAS, that's AMS.
So back to your career here with the industry and as an economist in the industry, what comes to mind when the most significant industry happenings, either from a positive or say a challenging perspective, that really stood out for you, and why would that be? What are those like wow moments for you?
Well, I think the most positive thing has been probably the growth of exports over the years and the growth of market access that we've had with our policy efforts for MPPC, and then of course the marketing efforts of the Port Board and the USMEF. That's been a great thing. We export about 26% of our production now, and that has fueled the growth of the U.S. industry over these last 30 years. On the painful side, of course, the debacle of 1998 was horrible because it was a structural change that forced so many people out of the business. Last year, by the numbers, was even worse, but we didn't have the kind of exit in the business that we had in 98, and I don't think we will. But still, 98 unfortunately sticks out as a bad point. The difficulties with the checkoff back in the early 2000s were on one note horrible, and then on the next note triumphant, and then on the next note horrible, and then we finally separated the two industry organizations, and we've got along pretty well with that since then. I think seeing people grow. I've just seen so many people that involved in this business, individual companies that have grown, people that have joined them, and you've seen them progress in their careers has been a really positive thing to me. I've always enjoyed interacting with the boards of directors of the two organizations, and I think that's been really good. I think we've had some real successes on designing some programs. I mentioned mandatory price reporting. That was a painful experience back in 1999 and 2000 coming up with that, and I think it served us pretty well. I think we designed a pretty good system, and I'm proud to have been part of that. So. There have been good times and bad times, as with anything, but it's been a really good run. And I've shared this many times. I tell my kids that, they need to always be mindful that everything they have in life came from a pig. And that's true of me too. So.
That's a very good point. So we have you, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you just for a real quick little market outlook. What do you see for this fall going into 2025 for the hog industry? What's on your radar?
Well, it's pretty safe to sit in August and say hog prices are going to be lower. That's about a sure bet in the fall, unless something really strange happens. And we think that's going to be the case again this year. We're going to have to see some pressure on the cutout value, but not a lot. The real pressure is going to be on spot hog markets. I mean, there are a lot of hogs that are priced off the cutout value or formulas or those kind of things, and they're not going to break nearly as hard. But that little segment of hogs on the spot market is going to be in some trouble because we're going to be right at slaughter capacity for the entire fourth quarter and beyond in a few weeks, to the same degree we were last year. And we had hog prices, I think we had a few days that started at 4. All right. So I don't think it'll be quite that bad, but I think it's going to be pretty lousy this fall. Now, next year, we see some recovery. I think right now the futures market is low relative to where cash hogs and the CME lean hog index will be when those contracts expire. I think we've got a lot of negativism in the market right now. Probably more important is what happens with costs in the long run. Costs are certainly down. The average right now for this year in my model is going to be somewhere around 85. Last year it was 97. So that's an improvement, but that's a far cry from 63, which it was in 2020. And we're not going to, I don't think we're ever going back there. We might see costs with a 7 in the front of them at some point, but that's kind of a stretch as well. And so I think we have to adjust this business to cover $80 plus cost in the long run in order to be in the black. And productivity keeps putting more hogs on the market regardless of what we're doing. And that means that you got to make a pretty deep cut in the sow herd at some point in order to keep these supplies where we are. We're not producing too many hogs, in my opinion. We're producing about the same number we have the last 3 years, but costs have changed. And because of that, it's put us really behind the 8 ball. The international side is still positive for us. We got growth this year. We see the European Union kind of backing away from exports. That's going to open opportunities for us. We are going to have more competition from the Brazilians as we go forward. I don't think there's any question about that. But still, I see a bright future for this business. We have a large country, a lot of arable land, a lot of open spaces, a lot of really good packing plants, a lot of really smart people, access to world trade, big oceans on both sides of us that protect us from some things that otherwise we might get, like African swine fever. We're still in a very, very good position to be the world leader in pork production for many, many years to come.
That said, any final words of wisdom, Steve Meyer, words of wisdom to leave producers with here today?
Love your job and love your family. I think that's a good one.
Very good. And you're getting ready to retire, I think I heard here coming up, and you've kind of been slowly doing that, but I don't know. Are you ever gonna hang it up, or you just you're always going to be watching those markets and giving reports out here and there?
I told him July 31st. My wife says I'm not doing a very good job of it so far. But I have told him that beginning soon, I won't be in the office every day. And so if you're not in the office every day, you can't stay on top of the things I have to stay on top of. So that will be passed along at our organization to Lee Schultz, Dr. Lee Schultz with Iowa State. He's will be joining EverAg on September 1, and we're really excited to have Lee there.
That's great. So, Dr. Steve Meyer, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, too, for all the years that you've helped guide the pork industry. I know your regular columns in National Hog Farmer and your presentations as part of our Global Hog Industry Virtual Conference have always been top-notch and very well received by our readers and our followers. So thank you so much for that and for everything that you've done for the industry. Everyone appreciates that.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today and wish you all the best.
And don't forget to fill out those government reports as they come through. Give that data. Steve needs it, and so does Lee Schultz as he's coming on board. So until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.